Sorry, Matt, we have to actually start the meeting. Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. Okay, Mr. McLean, could you please call the roll?
Yes. Buckler.
Here.
Kempner.
Here.
Murad.
Here.
Patterson.
Here.
Richardson.
Here.
Shadle.
Present.
Smith.
Here.
Trotto.
Here.
Kaplansky.
Here. Okay, next up on the agenda, we have the the approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any changes or a motion to approve?
One addition, Madam Chair.
Yes.
You'll see before you there's some citizen communications on one of the items on the agenda this evening.
Correct. Any other comments on the agenda or motions?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Support.
Any discussion? Mr. McLean?
Buckler.
Yes.
Kempner.
Yes.
Murad.
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Shadle.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Trotto.
Yes.
Kaplansky.
Yes. Okay, moving on. Next is the minutes from the March 26th Planning Commission meeting. Any changes or additions to the minutes or motions to approve?
Motion to approve. Support.
Mr. McLean?
Kempner.
Yes.
Murad.
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Shadle.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Trotto.
Yes.
Buckler.
Yes.
Kaplansky.
Yes. Okay, next up we have citizen comment. Any citizens that have comments for items that are not on the agenda, please come forward at this time. We'll ask you to sign in on the sheet there provided by Mr. McLean. Just as a reminder, the Planning Commission will not engage you in any discussion. When you come to the microphone, please state your name and address and try to keep your comments to 4 minutes or less. Is there anyone who would like to comment on items not on the agenda this evening? Okay, seeing no one, we'll close citizen comment at this time then. We also have several communications that are related to the design overlay amendment that we have before us this evening. Are there any other communications besides those that we've received this far?
None at this time.
Okay. Then we will move on to the first order of business, the capital improvements plan. Mr. McLean or Mr. Baumgarten, who will be doing the introduction for that?
I'll defer to Mr. Baumgarten. Since our discussion last month, they've been able to make some tweaks and revisions to the proposed capital improvements plan. We were able to provide a copy in your packet this month. So without further ado, I will turn things over to Mr. Baumgarten.
Thanks, Mr. McLean, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. I appreciate the opportunity to come back before you to continue our conversation on the capital improvements plan. As Mr. McLean mentioned, you were hopefully had a chance to review and see we did have a couple of changes, but the document as a whole actually it reflects pretty well where we stood a month ago, actually. So I'm not sure what the preference of the Commission is here. I can go back through line by line. I didn't know if Madam Chair, if we wanted to start with questions and then talk about specific items. As Ms. McLean mentioned again, I think I talked about last time sort of our budget process. We did go through and have the department by department meetings. Each of the department contributes their needs for the upcoming fiscal year, starting July 1 and running through June 30th of the next year. And that is sort of how this document comes together. It is then reviewed by myself and the finance director, as well as the fantastic staff and the finance department. And we kind of come to the conclusion of whether or not this is heading in the right direction. And previewing this, this now probably likely at the end of this week will be included in a draft of the budget, sent to council for their review, and we'll actually sit down and again go through with them line by line over on the 13th and the 14th of May through our budget work session. So certainly, we don't lack for eyes on this document. And our budget process, we believe to be very comprehensive, and, you know, it's something we enjoy. Actually, it's a sickness, but we enjoy doing it every year, so.
So I don't think we need to go line by line unless someone on the commission wants to. We did have the opportunity to do that at the last meeting, so I think that was great for us to have the opportunity to go through it before it actually came before us for adoption. So if there's any questions from any of the commissioners?
I have
Mr.
a
Richardson?
question. I raised this last time. I don't think we really got into it very deeply, but I'd like to know what accounting methodology pertains to the line items. Is it a simple payback period methodology, or does the methodology vary depending on the kind of project we're talking about? And I don't expect you to go through this and identify this or that. I would just kind of like a general answer to the question.
Generally, we don't. We're just starting to look at things like specific to energy projects where we look at what the possible payback could be. We've had conversations about, I think, with Councilmember Gavin, as well as the Environmental Advisory Committee, about trying to seed a revolving loan fund based on the savings that we're yielding and projects that we know will yield a decrease in operational costs, and then trying to account for those separately and over time developing a revolving loan fund to help make sure that there are funds specifically designated for projects that help lower our energy consumption and hopefully as well as our energy costs as well.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and I certainly intend to follow through, not only this forum, but the other ones that I participate. And particularly with respect to the parks items and the municipal building renovation items, I would strongly encourage the city administration to explore alternative financing methodologies which would provide greater feasibility for installing green features, solar perhaps in the case of the buildings, and more stormwater retention that might double as natural cover or open space alternatives with respect to the parks. So thanks for that answer, and I look forward to continuing to explore this with the city.
Sure. And if I may, through the chair, much of the conversations centered around the renewal of Oxford and Merchants Park, and what are actually designated towards making as many natural features as possible, and lessening the pavement on there as much as possible. Also, I think there's some opportunities for some green technologies and green infrastructure to be installed there. So we're very excited about that. It's that thread has run through every conversation I've sat with on that park, and good things coming there. I'm certain of it.
That's great. Thanks.
Any other questions? Or motions?
Again, if I may, through the
Yes.
chair, you'll notice that we intend to do a lot. And I think that's just sort of the best way of encapsulating our capital improvements plan, not just this year, but in the upcoming years. One of our desired outcomes in this budget, and as well as we look forward to the 2021 budget as well, that's fiscal year 20-21. Again, trying to invest capital into our facilities and our features. We're actually looking at a plan to spend down of our fund balance a little bit in order to do much of these capital projects as possible. Flashing back to where we were just 10 short years ago, we were in cutting mode and kicking mode, and that kicking the can down the road kind of mode, where we weren't able to make such quality investments into our facilities. We were trying to make sure that the lights stayed on and programs stayed intact and services stayed intact. So it's good knowing where we were just a short period of time now to put forth and propose a budget to the Planning Commission and the city council and the residents at large, something that really does a good job of investing. We've been fortunate to build up our fund balance up to this point, and so we've done so in order to be able to fund capital improvements like this. So again, it's, there's numbers on the page, but what I'm more excited about is what this means and the goals that this helps us fulfill here.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I read this right, and I should know this from previous years, but a year goes by, we're making a motion both to adopt this, the capital improvements plan, and also recommend adoption by the city council.
I'll defer to Mr. McLean, but I believe we're making a motion to adopt,
Yes.
not necessarily recommend adoption.
Well, it says that. Are we doing both?
I'd say the motion could satisfy both things. The capital improvements plan needs to be adopted by both the commission as well as the city council, and so
So-
with the motion could come, a positive recommendation for the council as well.
Our motion would obviously be a signal to the city council.
Sure. By affirming it, perhaps the recommendation is inherent.
Well, I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, if I may, to adopt the capital improvements plan. We went through it almost line by line a month ago, and as some of us have said.
Can I get one question in before?
Yeah.
What do you have for the accountability of it, though? I mean, do we get a projection for next year that says how much we actually spent on things this year?
It'll be included, yes, we do, specific to our audit. We go through each year and
Do you
go
have
essentially.
one from last year that could show us what happened to last year's budget compared to what we have now?
Our comprehensive annual financial review, our CAFR, as we call it, on the shorthand, it's posted to the website, and you can go through and see where we made our investments in the capital, as well as how depreciation took its toll on said assets, and then where the city's total net position shifted to from one year to the next. So yeah, it's a very comprehensive document.
My thought would be nice to see where it ended up from last year on the same document.
How many of these we were able to check off?
Yeah. Like, we had it projected to do 10 of these, we did 10 of them, but, they cost us an extra $150,000. It doesn't say that.
Gotcha, okay. I understand.
Maybe next year we could have that added to this spreadsheet.
I'll look it up.
Mr. Smith, would you like to continue with the motion?
Well, my motion stands, and, recommend, as I was saying, we went through this almost line by line a month ago, and there's a few minor changes, but they're all very minor, so my motion stands to adopt.
Support.
Any other comments or discussion? Mr. McLean?
Murad,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Shadle,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Trotto,
Yes.
Buckler,
Yes.
Kempner,
Yes.
Kapelansky.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
Mr. Baumgarten.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, next up, we have a site plan review for SP 0319 from the Department of Public Safety. Mr. McLean, will you be introducing that item?
Yes. The Public Safety Department is proposing a minor expansion of the existing truck bay. As you'll note, it faces 12 Mile. The proposed expansion would add 12 feet to what's there already. They would be replacing the overhead door, and the proposed height of the expansion would be 19 feet 4 inches. Would the architect, right in front of me, to answer any questions that the Planning Commission may have. As far as site plans go, this one is pretty straightforward. It's a minor addition. It's going to be very helpful to the Department of Public Safety for getting their vehicles in there.
So am I correct in saying that it's in compliance with all of our ordinance requirements and that the facade would match the existing facade of the building?
That is correct.
Anything to add?
I'm Matt Vetter with Schaefer Construction. As Mr. McLean mentioned, it's a pretty small addition. It totals in about 608 square feet. We are extending 12 feet from the initial bays, original bays. We're adding 3 new doors. They'll be in the same locations, in line with the existing 3 doors. Other than that, it's going to look about like it does out there now.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that wanted to comment on this particular item? No? Okay, then I will open it up to the Planning Commission for discussion, questions, comments. Mr. Smith?
Mr. Chairman, what is the final setback from the doors to the right-of-way line? I mean, it's just the,
25,
is it
25
20?
feet.
I know that's what our ordinance says.
No, on the, for the, in the O1 district, unless you're a corner lot, there is not a required.
Okay, is this in the O1 district? I thought it said it was in the,
First paragraph, second page.
oh, okay. Okay. Then my only question is, when you bring your trucks out, they're not going to be, hopefully not be blocking the sidewalk.
No, it'll be really close, but they will not be blocking that.
Okay, good, because the rest of us get in trouble for doing that.
Exactly. The new tower ladder that we've ordered, the basket is above it, so it'll be above any pedestrians.
Okay. That's really the only comment I had. I just wanted to make sure we weren't encroaching on the sidewalk, or encroaching where, as the trucks are pulled out, we're causing ourselves a problem. Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Generally, I thought this was a pretty straightforward plan. There's not a whole lot to comment on. It's in compliance with all of our ordinance requirements, which we obviously like to be. It's matching the existing building.
Great.
So all in all, this seems pretty well put together. Anyone else or motions?
I can make a motion.
Mr. Smith?
Make a motion to approve site plan review SP 03019. In addition to the existing public safety building to the north.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion or comments on the motion? Mr. McLean?
Patterson.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Shadle.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Trotto.
Yes.
Buckler.
Yes.
Kepner.
Yes.
Murad.
Yes.
Kapelansky.
Yes. Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good luck.
Okay. Moving on, next on the agenda is the zoning map amendment for the proposed design overlay district. Mr. McLean, did you want to do a brief introduction on this item?
Yes, the proposed map amendment is a kind of a companion piece to what the Planning Commission recommended back in January. As you'll recall, in January, the Planning Commission passed a recommendation to City Council that the proposed design overlay district be adopted. Part of that means amending the zoning map to add the proposed overlay to the properties that fall within the boundaries of the Downtown Development Authority, which is the commercial properties on 12 Mile from Greenfield to Coolidge, and then Coolidge from 12 Mile to 11 Mile. If the Planning Commission takes action to recommend adoption, this would go before City Council for reading, discussion, and some type of final action.
Okay, so it's my understanding then that this is a follow-up item to the design overlay district that we previously recommended approval of, but that has not yet gone to council.
That is correct.
Okay. With that, this is a public hearing, so I will open the microphone for public comment. Just a reminder to please keep your comments to 4 minutes or less. There is a sign-in sheet provided by Mr. McLean, so if you could please sign in as well. And then as a further reminder, the Planning Commission will not engage you in discussion. If there's questions brought up and items for us to comment on, we will try to do that during the course of our discussion. So is there anyone here who would like to comment on this particular item?
Good evening, Kurt Height, Berkley. When it comes to a lot of the elements of the design guidelines, I actually like a lot of them, so it's weird that I gotta get up here and talk against the overlay district itself, only because, when you look at certain aspects of it, there's several reasons, and I would recommend, and I wish that you guys would not have recommended it to council, I wish it would have been denied. Municipalities are cautioned against overusing it when traditional zoning can do the job. And it has been mentioned previously that the DDA guidelines could have been incorporated into our traditional zoning, which would have eliminated many of the issues proposed, that this proposed one could cause. The Planning Commission has received correspondence from 2 former commissioners that have spoken out against it and asked that you not approve it. The failure on the part of the DDA to follow clear instructions given by council in regards to completing the evaluation process prior to final approval on the Coolidge Lane reduction gives me pause to think that we're going to give them admin approval on designs of buildings and to go around, basically circumvent some of our zoning ordinances, and that concerns me. It is not compliant with our future land use portion of our master plan, so therefore it goes against recommendations from the MML. They state that the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, Section 203, a zoning ordinance shall be based upon a plan, which is the master plan, that is designed to promote public health, safety, general welfare, and encourage use of lands in accordance with their character and adaptability to limit the proper use of the land. The plan, the master plan, is the legal basis for all zoning. The Michigan Municipal League warns that a plan which is not actively followed and implemented may lead to problems for the community in the future. Failure to follow the plan may discredit any attempt to use the plan as a defense for actions which may be challenged by property owners or developers. A good example of this is in 2005, the City of Berkeley's Planning Commission was in the process of considering adoption of form-based code, in addition to our current zoning ordinances. There was a point when Amy Manson, the former city planner, advised the commissioners that they had to pull back the reins a little bit because if they proceeded further and adopted the form-based code, they would not be following the master plan, and so therefore advised that they needed to adopt an amendment to the master plan that would support the form-based code. She said that if they didn't, so they didn't want to break their own rules, so the amendment was adopted in 3 short months. While this overlay district is not to that extreme, there are some parts that would not follow our current master plan, since it would allow townhouses in a zoning district where they are not currently permitted under regular or special use, and that would go against our future land use amendment of 2017, which says, based upon meetings with the community, new apartments, 2-family or 4-family housing, and townhouses should not be constructed along major thoroughfares unless where it's currently, it should only be constructed along major thoroughfares where it's currently permitted. So therefore, you can't just plop them up anywhere. There's certain areas that do not allow it. Now, the MML Planning Commissioner's Handbook says that building a community is like putting together a jigsaw puzzle, and that the master plan might be considered the top of the jigsaw puzzle. It shows us the final form of the puzzle. Our vision for the future, therefore, by adopting the overlay district with parts that are not compliant with our master plan, is like having the wrong pieces to the puzzle. They just do not fit. The Planning Commissioner's Handbook also advises that both the master plan and the zoning ordinances should be consistently and accurately followed to make sure that they are applied fairly and consistently to those they affect. Together, they are valuable tools in building the kind of community you want. I just feel that a few of these concerns should have been enough to not adopt the rezoning, and I would hope that the PC and the council consider the totality of these and deny the rezoning of the overlay district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Charles Terrell from Berkeley. I also am still foursquare against the overlay, but that's really not what we're here tonight to talk about. We're only here tonight to talk about the map. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Traditionally, overlays have been for small, distinct, defined areas near woodlands, wetlands, historic districts, or other such, not covering basically 4 miles, 2 mile, both sides of the street for 2 miles. So inappropriate use of an overlay when we're strictly talking about the map. At one point, Madam Chair, you had been at a council meeting and referred to current zoning as being haphazard and outdated. I don't know what that means. This is not the way, the overlay is not the way to resolve haphazard and outdated. This is an abdication of the responsibilities of yourselves. It is not a fulfillment of what the Planning Commission should be doing. It should have been, it could have been, should have been, still could be done through changes to the zoning ordinances rather than this wholesale, large scale, beyond scope overlay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Ann Novitsky. I'm a Berkeley resident and also a business owner of a sweet little architecture firm on 12 Mile and Prairie. I'm not the architect of the license, but I have opinions too. This Berkeley downtown design guidelines and the overlay district is a fantastic tool, and I really want to thank everybody who worked on it, first of all, because it gives people who aren't professionals in the design industry a glimpse into what professionals really do. The overlay district and this, whatever this is trying to be, is a complete overreach of the Downtown Development Authority and, in fact, the office of our Community Development Director. Because you people are supposed to know what's in here. And now the citizens of Berkeley have these tools to help you give input and make recommendations to the council on what will get built in Berkeley with our zoning laws and ordinances. And I agree that if the laws and ordinances aren't enough, change them. But don't insult the intelligence, of the Planning Commission. Who knows what's in here, right? The citizens of Berkeley who now have this information, and leave it up to two individuals to decide what gets decided to come here for you and for public discussion. I think that's a mistake. And to charge people extra money to see people who should be helping businesses locate here is an affront. When's the last time anyone saw an extra layer of bureaucracy, extra fees, and extra time ever improve economic development? And that's what I feel this thing does, and I wouldn't support it at all. And neither should you. You should know better. You should do your job. Thank you.
Wendy Zabramski, Gardner Avenue resident. I too am very appalled at what's going on here. First of all, we have a person that is a DDA director who is overreaching everything. She decided to go upon herself and plug in this road diet last week when no 10-day notice was given. She again chose to start today, or Monday, without even so much as having all of the specifically asked for from City Council that be in place before she starts. She's rogue. She does whatever she wants. There are many, many business owners that she has gone head to head. I would hope that you would do your own job as a planning commission. We do not need another branch of government. As a matter of fact, she needs to go. I had a nice conversation with Tim before the last planning commission meeting. He's not for this because he knows he won't make decisions, she will.
Additional comments?
Hi, I'm Donna Bishop. I have a building, 3839 12 Mile, which is between Tyler and Greenfield. Our area of Berkeley, our corridor between Tyler and Greenfield, has been largely, I would say, ignored by the DDA. Part of our taxes are allocated to the DDA, but yet when it comes to the improvements, that area, which is basically Hartfields to Greenfield, has not been part of these improvements, which includes the sidewalks, the streetlights, the pavers, the planters, the irrigation. So because of that, I don't believe that we should be part of this overlay. The DDA has not spent funds on our area. Back when the beautification improvements started, I had made several phone calls asking, when are you going to get to our area? When are you going to get to our area? And I was told we were phase 5. Well, when I called today, inquiring once again, when are we going to get some of these improvements that all the other areas have gotten, I was told probably never. So because of that, I don't think that we should be told, what to do with our facades or how to make our improvements. I also believe that if small businesses want to make an improvement to their building, and if they are on a small budget, or if they want to buy a building, possibly all the money they have is going to be put into the purchase, and to require them to spend a larger amount of money on improvements is going to deter people from moving into Berkeley or doing any improvements to their buildings, because they won't be able to afford what the design overlay or the design guidelines are going to require. So because of that, I'm against it, especially for the area from Tyler to Greenfield. I mean, I'd love to see our area improved, but I haven't seen any part on the DDA or the city of Berkeley to do this. I also have a letter from the city of Berkeley dated in October of 16, that said that there was $2.3 million budgeted in the 16-17 budget for our sidewalks and streetlights, and I have not seen that happen. So I'd like to know what happened to that money, because once again, our area was ignored. So because of that, I believe it should not be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments?
My name is Brian Zifkin. My wife and I, Aniki, just purchased a building on 12 Mile, 3875 and 3895, and we just opened our business in December of this year, Zolman's Treasures. I can tell you that if somebody would have showed me what's going to be in this overlay and what's going to be required of me to get approval after approval after approval for renovations to the building, for the type of decorations that I might want to do to my building, for the color that I might want to paint my building, if that would have been presented to me before I purchased my building, I would have very, very seriously thought of not moving into Berkeley, because I would have not wanted the extra aggravation that it takes to go above all of the building inspectors and the fire inspectors and the police department and everything else that we had to do in order to be compliant with everything already. If I would have had to worry about my interior decorator or my exterior decorator or whoever is going to be taking care of my grass and my plants and everything else, if I had to go through all of those extra layers to make sure that I made the city happy with what I'm going to be doing on the inside and the outside of my building, I really, really would have, thought again and again if I wanted to go through that aggravation. It's hard enough to open a business in a city with all the inspections that we have to go through and all the compliance that we have to go through now. I can tell you that the one thing that worried me the most when I was moving in is that they wanted me in the beginning to tear down the pole sign that was already there, because it doesn't meet the new current standards. And somebody had mentioned, I'm not going to say who, but someone was mentioning, my building is now the gateway of the art district of Berkeley, and your sign and your facade should, present that, and it should be, the most beautiful thing as you're coming into Berkeley. I'm like, I'm a small business, and the idea that they were throwing out for this new sign, I was seeing tens of thousands of dollars to build a new sign. Thankfully, they haven't made me do it yet. And they didn't like the fact that I was bringing my sign from my previous location in Oak Park to Berkeley. They didn't want me to bring that sign either. Thankfully, I was able to get that pushed through. But those were things that I'm sitting back going, whoa, do I want to add tens of thousands of dollars to my construction to make somebody happy that's not even elected? Thank you.
Other comments? No one? Okay, with that, I will close the public hearing then and open it up to the commission for their discussion. Who would like to start on this one?
Let's be clear, we're just talking about the zoning map right now, we're not talking about the
So
actual.
to be clear, right, we've already discussed and talked about the design overlay district and all the text that went along with that, and we spent, I think, quite a few meetings going through the minutia of that. And that was the tool that's been, is suggested to be used to implement the design guidelines, which were done some time ago. So at this point, we're just talking about the map, which was the area that was highlighted in green on the packet and basically covers all of 12 Mile and all of Coolidge, more or less. Yes, so we're not getting into the specifics of the district. We've already made a recommendation on that, and that will be up to the council to decide whether or not they want to accept that recommendation. This is the companion piece that's referred to in section 138.457, where it specifically says, and described as the downtown district in chapter 42, downtown development of the Code of Ordinances. The district's boundaries shall be shown on the official zoning map of the city of Berkeley. So we are doing this last piece right now, making a recommendation on the district's boundaries shall be shown on the official zoning map of the city of Berkeley. Does that clear things up?
Okay, I can start.
Okay, Ms. Kemper?
One of the things that did concern me, especially during the training, was when Mr. Carlisle was talking about how any rezonings have to match the master plan. So, I believe Mr. Height was talking about the problem with the 2017 amendment and the design guidelines that state townhouses in Gateway South should be a use. Directly facing Coolidge or whatever, they're not allowed there. So now we have a rezoning that's not matching our master plan, and that should not happen. I want to even say it's zoning enabling act. So, yeah, like the form-based code, we had to adopt an amendment in order to allow the multifamily housing. So I think as the ordinance was approved, it becomes a problem with rezoning because it's not meeting our master plan.
Okay. So just as a follow-up to that, and Mr. McLean, maybe you could chime in with some additional comments if you have any. So this is an overlay district. So we'll still have the underlying zoning, which is in compliance with the master plan, in place.
Yes, the base zoning.
Yep, the base zoning will still be there, and this is a district that's overlaying that. So I think you're correct in the comment that the zoning does have to match what's shown in the master plan. The master plan is generally the basis for zoning, and that is
Right.
in the planning enabling legislation that you're referring to. But this is an overlay district, so it's a little bit different. We also have the design guidelines process that we already went through, and it was clear in what areas those guidelines would apply to. We also have the downtown master plan, which is currently underway. I believe they're just starting to get the draft together at this point. So that will coincide with this as well.
But that hasn't been adopted yet either.
It hasn't been adopted yet, but I would defer back to that this is an overlay district, and the underlying zoning is still there. As far as the uses, you can always alter the uses in a zoning district. If we wanted to take the Gateway South district and add townhouses as a permitted use, we could certainly consider doing that. The master plan dictates the general intent of the area, but certainly doesn't dictate all of the possible uses that could be part of it.
I would agree, except that our amendment very specifically says that townhouses, or apartments, 2 to 4 family, should only happen in major thoroughfares where it's currently permitted. So I think you'd have to address that before.
If you wanted to
moving
add
on.
it to Gateway South, perhaps, yes. But again, this is an overlay district. And a master plan should be looked at as a living document, not as a written in stone document. We need to be able to change it and amend it if we needed to, as we're doing with the downtown master plan, in order to keep moving forward as a city.
Right.
So this overlay district, while it's overlaying over the original zoning districts, is still allowing the future land use map, the future land uses dictated in the master plan to move forward as part of the zoning map that are still there. We're just adding an additional layer.
Right, but the additional layer overrules the base zoning if they conflict.
It doesn't overrule the base zoning. Someone could still decide to come in and to develop, someone could still come in and develop under Gateway South if they wanted to look at that list of standards. The overlay district would apply as far as the design of the buildings go, but it doesn't negate all of the uses that are allowed as part of Gateway South. It overrules the district in places where there's a conflict in a facade requirement or a more general aesthetic requirement.
But it also says the most appropriate use of land. This is needed to establish and enhance the quality and compatibility of development, to establish consistent.
Correct, so it would allow the development of, go ahead, Mr. Richardson.
I'm sorry, I don't see anything in the overlay district ordinance amendment that changes any of the uses allowed in the underlying zoning.
That's correct.
This pertains to the design of whatever is approved to be there to begin with, or will be approved in the event the underlying zoning is changed in the future. But this doesn't, yes, there is language in here saying that this controls if there's a conflict, but there isn't a conflict with respect to uses. And if there is, somebody correct me. I just don't see it in here.
Well, not in here, but in the actual design guidelines, when it talks about Gateway South, it says townhouses are permitted use in there.
No, it couldn't say, it couldn't do, we can't amend the zoning like that.
The design, if everyone from the audience could just allow the commission to have their discussion at this point. The guidelines, you're correct, Mr. Richardson, dictate the site design and the type of aesthetic look that we want to have in this area of the city, but they certainly don't overrule the uses that are permitted. They may suggest uses that would be appropriate and that we could move forward with on future amendments should we decide to do so, again, in coordination with the efforts of the downtown master plan. But they don't dictate these are the permitted uses and overrule
To my knowledge, yes. Now,
Correct.
I mean, somebody wants to bring me language that.
I mean, it has uses in here, uses for Gateway South.
Suggested uses that would be appropriate.
And so then the problem is that there's nothing in this that, and I like, again, I want to say, I like the design guidelines. I want to avoid unintended issues, and I want to stay within the legal bounds of what we're allowed and able to do. So when I read this doesn't tell us, and an ordinance should be written in plain language, so when you read it, you can understand it. So when it says, to encourage the most appropriate use of land as detailed in the design guidelines, and your design guideline says these are the uses in the area, and this says this overrules, there's nothing that says except for land use.
Ms. Buckler?
The sentence before that specifically states, in all cases, applicants for building permits in an overlay district shall meet both the requirements of the base zoning district and the additional provisions, requirements, and restrictions in the overlay district. So this does not, it goes back to the based zoning. Very clear language in this. And I'd like to point out, I'd like to reiterate too, the master plan is a living document. It does govern, it does grow and move with us. We certainly don't want to, do we want to go back to we can't have a 30-year-old document governing everything. It has to move and change, and there's opportunities to change. That's what these are for. I think when I sat in your chair, I mentioned this is going to be a very long and painful process to weave all of these things together to modernize Berkeley, yet keep the character that we want. So you want both of these things. Keeping the character of Berkeley, keeping and allowing it to stagnate in that character, nobody wants. Wholesale change, nobody wants either. There is a leap of faith in the first steps to get there, because there is a little chicken and the egg going on. It's like, what comes first and how do we do it? we can pick a pathway that gets us there, and I think we picked the right pathway to get us there, and there's some painful steps along the way. But you have to start. So you can think of it like it has to encompass a lot of things. There are some places where you can't enter that circle, but there are gates that you come through. I'm mixing my metaphors here, but you still have to go around and you have to get everything in, and you have to cover the whole land. So I'm sorry my metaphors are off, but it's like we chose to start at this point. And this is a logical progression of how to get all of these things done. We could choose to start with the master plan, and then everything can fall from it. But the master plan process takes a couple of years at best. And we have some other things that are pressing on us. We have some dictates from the city council with regard to complete streets and Main Street and all of these other things. We have opportunities as grant funding comes available to us. We don't know that grant funding will be here in 5 years. 5 years ago, we probably couldn't have gotten grants. I mean, there's, we have to take advantage of things as they come along. So it may not have been the most perfect place to start. I'm not sure there is a perfect place to start from here. We're not playing that Sim City game where it's like you plop your first thing down and you build from it and maybe something burns down or whatnot. We're not doing that. We're dealing with a fully, and we have to function in the meantime. So this is an overlay district. It's a little modern thinking for our city. I'm sorry. You've had your opportunity for public comment. I get my opportunity for comment. Thank you. I didn't interrupt you or whoever's talking. I prefer that you not interrupt me. So the overlay district is a leap. There's some things that make me uncomfortable, not enough. Sometimes I think this is well written. I think we've hashed it out many times. I do not think it drives everything. It is another tool in the toolbox. Frankly, in doing it this way, it's a tool that we can sell at the used tool store if we decide it's not working for us. It becomes a lot easier to come out than wholesale changing our zoning to adopt it and weaving that in. This is, I think, an easier for us. If it determines that it's not working for us, we can make it go away a little easier.
That's correct.
I mean, it's actually, I think, a good pathway for us. So, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to make sure that we're refocusing too the discussion on, we have debated this design overlay district and made our recommendation. At this point, we're
Right.
just talking about the map and the boundaries that are shown in the proposed map amendment. So this is really just that one item. Other comments, discussion, I'm sure. Mr. Murad?
So another use for an overlay district, in this case, the DDA covers 4 different zoning districts.
Correct.
So to not have an overlay, we'd have to go through and change the ordinance in 4 different districts. That's how a overlay district is used when you have certain things happening. In this case, it's our downtown. As it's been mentioned, we've had this before us for months. I think we started it last summer sometime, right?
Yeah.
So we've talked about it a lot. As Ms. Buckler pointed out, we do have a lot of things coming up. We are starting to discuss and look at starting our master plan, an update to it. We've talked about updating our whole ordinance book from page 1 to whatever it ends up to be. Every single ordinance to be rewritten. So at that time, this might go away or this is going to change, because then we can maybe incorporate this in. This could then come from, like we said, DDA is now working on a downtown master plan. It's not a DDA master plan, it's a downtown master plan, but they are working on it. And we'll incorporate that into our master plan.
Correct.
That's when all of that stuff will be adopted, and that could be 2 years from now. So, as an example, one of the things when the La Salette proposal came before us, we kept pushing the developer that we wanted all brick. We didn't want the the stucco type material
Yes.
on the facade. That's one of the things that is in this design guidelines. So, but really, we're here to talk about the map. What's the map going to incorporate? And really, it incorporates the DDA district.
Correct.
So,
Other comments?
Madam Chair.
Mrs. Shadle?
To get back to the agenda item, the zoning map amendment, I think what's being proposed is exactly in line with what we've talked about concerning the zoning map, concerning the different districts within the DDA, and I have no issue with the amendment.
Thank you.
I do have one comment, even though it doesn't really apply to the map, there is still a typo in this draft.
Okay.
Where it says, where did I highlight it? You're missing the word no greater than 500 square. It says she could approve
What-
things greater than 500.
What section are you at?
Section 138, 550, sorry, 551.
551.
Alterations to the existing building and expansions greater than 500 square feet. It should say no greater.
Yes,
than
it should say no greater.
It's a very important one.
That is very
I
important,
think
yes.
I would have noticed that.
Thank you.
You're slipping.
You do have it correct in the second portion of the amendment.
Got it, and it'll be corrected.
Other comments?
I
Mr. Patterson?
agree with Commissioner Shadle that we are talking about the map tonight, and the map does a perfect job of overlaying the district in question, so I agree with the map tonight.
Okay. Other comments from the commission? I believe the staff is looking for a motion, a recommendation from us this evening so that this can move forward to the city council's consideration in conjunction with the text that we sent forward a month or two ago,
Right.
several months ago.
I can make a motion to approve the zoning map amendment, proposed design overlay district.
I'll support.
Comments or discussion on the motion? Mr. McLean?
Richardson,
Yes.
Shadle,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Trotto,
Yes.
Buckler,
Yes.
Kempner,
Nope.
Murad,
yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
Kaplanski.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So this will move forward, just for the audience's benefit, to an upcoming council meeting that will be posted on the website at some point, when that's going to be?
Yes, I will have to discuss with City Manager Baumgarten when that will appear on the city council agenda. But ultimately, the fate of this proposed overlay district will be decided by city council.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, is that,
Yes,
in
Mr.
other words,
Richardson?
the council has not acted on the language?
They have not acted on the language. They were actually waiting for this particular
So
piece,
they're
I
gonna do it
think.
together.
Yes,
Right.
they'll do it all as one package, which I think makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, then we'll move on to the next item, which is a discussion on uses in the local business and office districts. Mr. McLean, would you like to introduce this item?
Madam Chair, I'm having a hard time hearing.
Yeah, if I could ask the audience members to please be quiet at this point. If you want to have any discussion, please step out in the hall, because we need to continue on with the meeting. Excuse me. Ma'am, if you could just step out in the hall if you're going to be discussing things, we need to continue on with the meeting. Okay, do you want to introduce this item, Mr. McLean?
Yes, at the March meeting, I had shared some correspondence with the Planning Commission from a developer asking that the Planning Commission consider a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to allow for child care centers as a principal use or possibly a special use in the local business district and the office district. Currently, those uses are only permitted uses in the Greenfield District and Community Center piece. Child care centers are allowed as a special use in the R1, R2, and multiple family residential districts. I've included a copy of the letter from that developer asking that the commission consider changes to the use in those districts. I've also provided some examples of other communities allow child care centers, both as permitted uses and special uses. Shown examples from the communities of Clawson, Ferndale, Oak Park, and Royal Oak. And I believe the developer is in the audience. He may have some comments to make during the public comment portion of this. But I'm seeking some direction from the Planning Commission. You know, is this a direction that the Commission wants to move forward with?
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that wanted to comment on this before we started our discussion then? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Mark Kellenberger with 814 Development. Over the last few weeks, or last several weeks, I guess, we've had a few conversations with Director McLean, looking at the opportunity to expand opportunities for child care uses in the city of Berkeley. So we had a few productive conversations that led to the suggestion of petitioning the Planning Commission to consider this as an opportunity. Looking at the local business district and the office district as opportunities to expand this. Currently with the Greenfield district, it's mostly residential from that standpoint. So you'd be really inserting not a commercial use, but you'd have to take down several homes and kind of uproot the development pattern along Greenfield. And the community, the facilities portion is mostly school and community resources. So looking at that, and then the special approval in the R1 district just didn't seem to make a ton of sense, trying to uproot in a predominantly residential area. So we looked at this as a great opportunity to bring an amenity to Berkeley and thought it made sense and didn't really cause much harm. So we'd be happy to be a part of any discussion you might have tonight or in the future, and look forward to your consideration on this matter. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wanted to comment on this item? Okay, then we'll open it up for discussion to the Planning Commission. Thoughts?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, over the years, we've talked a lot about providing housing for seniors, but there's obviously the other end of that spectrum with little ones. And frankly, Berkeley is lacking, looking at our ordinance, it's just something that we don't have in there. I would imagine the special use in the residential districts is for someone who wants to do it in-home, I'm guessing. I wasn't here when that was made. Or in a school, an institutional use as a school could be also. I don't know where that came from. I don't have a problem with putting together something in our business district or whatever we decide to do. It does. I see. In buildings, in existing buildings, depending upon the licensing of the daycare, let's call it, it could be a complicated addition architecturally to add something in, because it's a higher level of fire control, egress, and all that other fun stuff that goes along with it. But it doesn't mean it can't be done. But I think we are behind as a city. We're behind recognizing a need for this kind of a use in our town.
I agree. I think it makes a lot of sense in a business district. It obviously complements offices and those types of uses, and probably would be less intrusive than it would be in a residential neighborhood. So
absolutely,
yep,
yeah.
I think
especially if it gets to a scale,
right?
A certain scale.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Mr. Richardson?
I'm just going to ask some really basic questions because I have little familiarity with this whole topic. Putting a daycare in a office district or a commercial district, what? Oh, yeah. I would imagine that, I don't know if you have a specific building or a specific design.
We've looked at some. It's not here before you this evening. We've not finalized anything, so.
Is it going to include outdoor opportunities?
We would look at outdoor recreation or playground opportunities, yes.
Yeah, to me, that raises some potential safety issues. I just wonder if you can comment on how you would handle,
Sure.
looking after the little ones
Absolutely.
in a busy area with a lot of traffic.
No, and that would be a vital concern to the business as well. So childcare uses generally, you would have to fence the playground areas, provide appropriate panic hardware on gates and that. So it's something that we would address in looking at potential sites or developments, and it's generally something that the child care users or providers are required. You're required to do as part of the layout and development.
Do you have to get a state license?
We would be licensed through the state of Michigan.
Have you thought at all about traffic patterns,
Yep.
pick up, drop off, that
Yep,
sort of
yep.
thing?
And it depends on the use, obviously, or the user. Our potential use would actually be a park and walk in. So it's not the long line of cars that you see stacked up in a line, shuffling kids in or out. So it's much more predictable. It's much safer, much more organized.
Do you have any thoughts yourself about what a zoning change should cover?
Yeah, absolutely. We've given quite a bit of thought. We've actually had the opportunity to be in front of a lot of planning commissioners and city councils to discuss this. That's one of the things we had discussed with Director McLean. Our willingness to be a part of a conversation going forward, we've got a pretty wide experience on this, so we'd be happy to discuss, potential criteria or just kind of structure with you on any of that.
And it's my understanding that the state licensing requirements and all of the building codes that Mr. Smith was referring to are quite stringent for this, much more so than they would be in a municipality, except for the outdoor play area that you referred to in your letter. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah, the states vary on the amount of outdoor play area or the placement of it. I see in some of the sample ordinances that were pulled, they actually call for play area inside, or a requirement to create that play area inside, which is a big demand on a building, as you can imagine, when you think of the number of children that are in a daycare, and now you're providing 50 square feet per child inside a building. Well, now you end up with a big auditorium that's not efficient or functional. So there are certain requirements like that we would look at. The state of Michigan does regulate the use, does require outdoor play area, does regulate standards for daycare, number of teachers or staff per child or per group of children. So there are those requirements that are in place that we would have to follow regardless as part of the licensing.
And just to speak to the outdoor or the inside play area,
Yeah.
I know my kids, if it's the wind chill's 20 or above, they are outside
Yeah.
twice a day. So
Absolutely. They want to be outside.
they want to be outside, and the
The
daycares
staff
want
wants
them
to be
out.
outside too, and it's just a good environment for them. Obviously, you want to provide some amenity inside or some ability to do that recreation, but generally speaking, we like to look at it being outside.
Other comments?
Yeah.
Mr. Murad?
Mr. Richardson, there's a daycare center on Lafayette in downtown Royal Oak between 4th and 6th Street, right across the street from the parking garage.
There is.
Yeah. So they do put them in downtowns because there's people that work in downtown, and it can be very convenient then. You could park in the garage, drop your child off, and then off to work you go.
Can't believe I haven't noticed it.
Yeah.
You actually
Yeah.
have one on Cummins and 12 Mile.
Cummings and
There's
12?
a childcare facility with outdoor play structures and right next to the old Doll and Toy Soldier Shop.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And, believe it or not, they have some nice feasibility for the access to it, looking at the overlay, the site plan of it. Drive in, drop your kid off, and leave. It's a pretty good setup what they got going on there. I know when I had kids in daycare, I was looking into places like this, and they were very interesting to me, but this one's a little bit on the higher end cost. But I know that the state requirements are very stringent.
Oh, yeah.
And as far as our standards, I think we should pretty much stick with what the state recommends. And I don't think you can get away with any less than what the state has. And they do inspect them very, very thoroughly and yearly for the ones that I've seen.
I would agree. I think deferring to the state standards makes a lot of sense. They're much more stringent than we could be. I know we have the higher threshold, or potentially are looking at the higher threshold for the outdoor play area, but I think the state standards are more than sufficient for that.
I think if we do if we write an ordinance for this, we would want, just say, we would want them to be licensed facilities.
Yes,
Yeah, you
I
have to be
agree.
licensed
That
by
we
the
can
state.
write that into our ordinance.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've read, when you read through the Clausen one in Oak Parks, it basically says
Yeah.
one of the first things you have to be licensed by the state. But just getting through that portion of it is a substantial feat.
Question.
Yes.
Do they get their license before they develop it or after it's done and inspected?
I think you probably have to do that both
You will.
times, right? If the
Generally
plans are
speaking,
under
you're
development?
gonna have to have your license before you open, but as for any developer, you wouldn't go through with the development not knowing that you're going to provide everything that the state licensing bureau is going to require,
I
so.
assume, though, that the state comes out then and makes sure all of those items are
They
in
would,
place.
yeah,
and-
they would. Yep, they do a full review, procedurally and then visits.
So the ordinance might be their business license doesn't get issued until they get their license up in state, because they'd have a site plan before us before their license got issued.
Well, but they will require, much like assisted living.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
required to achieve,
Right.
to get their state license prior
Sure.
to their certificate of occupancy.
Right, that's what I meant.
So, yeah,
But
yeah,
not
yeah.
before, that comes before planning.
No, but,
commission.
like anything, you'd be well advised to design to those
Yeah.
requirements.
Agreed.
It's cheaper to
Agreed.
do on paper
Agreed.
Yeah.
or with electrons now than it would be with, in drywall
Linear
and steel.
thinker,
BIM.
I'm a linear thinker.
So it sounds like there's maybe a general consensus among the commission that this makes sense in the business districts? Any comment on whether we would want it to be a principal permitted or special land use?
I think it should
Buckler?
be special, so we can discuss it each time to make sure that's appropriate for
Yeah.
the,
There may be, the business district is encompassing a
Yep.
lot, as we saw in that
Mhm.
map, in the last item. So there may be areas that probably aren't proper. But now that we're all aware of this, as you drive around in your daily, monthly life, you'll see them everywhere that you,
Yep. I would agree, a special land use, I think, would be appropriate.
yeah, there's one in Northville, just east of downtown, or just east of Northville, and it's on 8 Mile Road. There's a decorative metal fence. All the little cars are out there and everything, but there's a ton of traffic with trucks on that road, and it's right there, and it's been there forever. And they're
Oh,
like that all over the place. You see them on Rochester Road, you see them
apartment
all
complex.
over the place, yeah.
One on 11 Mile Road on the Huntington Woods side.
Right?
Oh,
there.
right, yeah.
It's got the
Sunny
brown
skies,
Yeah.
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 drop off.
Yeah, so they're everywhere.
11 miles.
As for more
Busy
specific,
as Rochester, thank God, but.
in the business district, I know in Detroit, a lot of times when we're building buildings, you'll see childcare facilities built into several of them. Copieware is a great example, Renson, they have built-in childcare facilities in them.
Large corporate facilities
Yeah.
all provide that now. Yeah.
But I don't see a large corporate facility.
No,
in
we don't
Berkeley,
have too
but
many of those.
No, but,
You never know, something could end up in there, so.
yeah,
We want in our plan.
okay. Any other comments or discussion on this?
I think it's a good idea.
Thank you for bringing it to our
Yeah.
attention.
Yeah.
The thought and consideration.
So I think Mr. McLean would be willing to move forward with such an amendment?
I can work on language for proposed special use, and I can bring that back to the planning commission.
Great. Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so next up on the agenda, we have liaison reports. Does anyone have anything to report?
Chamber,
Mr. Murad?
working on plans for the Art Bash. Currently, or at the last meeting, there were 155 artists had been submitted so far. Last year, they had 156, so about the same. And the date of that is the second Saturday in June. So I think that's the
June 8th, I just
June
saw
8th,
it.
yeah. So, and then also plans are in the works for the street art festival too. So, and a bunch of other things coming, but
Okay,
we'll discuss them as they become closer.
sounds fun.
All right.
So,
Yeah, Mr. Richardson, or Mr. Patterson, whoever wants to go.
Parks and Rec met, we talked about the budget, and a little bit, they're getting into the design of the Oxford Merchant Park.
Great.
So environmental, we did have a meeting last month with a consultant that's helping develop the energy efficiency plan for Berkeley's municipal buildings. That was quite a productive meeting, I believe, and the consultant is revising the plan based on that discussion. And so that's something we're continuing to work on. We've also applied to operate our bike corral again at the Art Bash. Hopefully we'll be approved. The last thing, we're not meeting on Thursday. We decided to cancel April's meeting due to attendance concerns. So we'll be meeting again in May.
Okay, good to know.
I actually did make the DDA meeting this month, difficult as it is for me to get there. They talked about budget basically, and the Berkeley Business After Hours part, things that are going on, special events in the city, the art bash coming up, a couple of things. Nothing too dramatic. So that's really all I have to report.
Okay. Any other liaison reports? No? Any other comments? Mr. Merritt, anything? Tim, anything to comment on?
Nope.
Matt, no? No comments?
No.
I have one. I hate bringing these things up, but on 11 Mile, the former Holly Market, they resided it in vinyl siding. That's not allowed in the district. So, you know, it happens. We don't like it, but it sets a bad precedent. And it's actually section 138.491.c, residential siding not allowed. So I don't know if that's just something that fell through the cracks or somebody missed it or whatever, but that really, the biggest problem with something like that happening, and we had someone quite a while ago, 10 years ago, want to put vinyl siding on a project on 12 Mile. Most of you weren't here then, and we said absolutely not. But that sets a precedent. The next guy's going to say, you let him do it. And I know we didn't have anything to do with that.
You have to wonder if they even pulled the permit.
Well, that,
I
I
don't
wasn't
think-
even go there, but
I don't think they did, we denied their
Yeah.
we were
we
designing
designed a rezoning.
rezoning.
And then I saw that they were working on it, but I
Yeah.
thought they must have gone.
So they must have pulled a permit, I guess. But I'm just bringing that up. It may be something nobody noticed, or I don't know what the circumstances are, but it just sets an unfortunate precedent for the next guy.
No, it was brought to our attention that there was some work being done there, and we've told them to stop until they've shown us plans for what's going to happen. So it's, we're aware of it. The building
So there's no
official
permit.
and code enforcement, that's
Okay.
correct. Yeah, building official and code enforcement
It's half done.
have been addressing this, and
Okay, well, he made
yeah,
a
they've been told to stop
Made an
until,
expensive mistake.
yeah, until we see a scope of work and plans.
Okay, that's a good answer.
Okay, if there's nothing else for the group, does anyone have a motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. McLean.
One item to add, the request for proposals for the master plan, comprehensive plan has been issued. The closing date for that will be May 10th.
Great.
And I think did we miss public comment for? typically do a public comment period towards the end. I think, did we
No.
miss
Oh,
that?
citizen comment?
No, there
No,
isn't.
we
I'm
only
sorry.
Comments at
That
the
was
end.
no.
No.
Got it, okay.
beginning now.
Yep.
Just wanted to make sure we had that addressed.
No, yeah, I think we got all the public comments. Thank you, though. And good to hear on the master plan RFP.
Yep.
That's
Will
great.
we be having any input on any input with that in May or June, or?
Yes, I'd like to put together a small committee with representation from the Planning Commission, ZBA, City Council, and city staff. So the Planning Commission will be heavily involved in the process.
Yeah.
How many commissioners were you thinking you would need help?
I was thinking the chairs of the Planning Commission and ZBA. We have the luxury of, the chairs of both of those commissions are professional planners and have gone through master planning processes. Thinking the City Council liaison, possibly Mayor Turbrack if he's open and willing to serve, the city manager and myself.
Okay. Yeah, I think the planning commission definitely wants to be heavily involved in that. So the more input that we can have in that, the better.
And I think once a consultant has been selected, I think we would have an expanded committee that's going to work with the consultant. So yeah, I think there's definitely more involvement, for the planning commission, moving forward.
I wonder if you might entertain the idea, and obviously we can work with the consultant on it, but having a master plan subcommittee of maybe 3 of the planning commissioners who could maybe weed through some of the initial recommendations and things to kind of get a grasp on things before it comes to the full planning commission.
I think that's a good idea.
Mr. Smith, did you have something else to add?
Yeah, I noticed Mr. Muir is squinting his eyes over there. I think last time around, which was 20 years ago, we either made the decision on the ultimate consultant or recommended to the city council.
Yeah,
It was a
I
long
think
time
they
ago.
presented to the planning commission
Yeah,
before a final
it
decision.
was knocked down to 3, and, yeah, and I don't know if we made the final decision or
I
city council
don't remember.
did.
I wasn't on the commission.
Oh,
at
you
the
weren't
time.
there then? Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you want to approach it here as a staff. In my experience, we haven't done that, but in my
I'm
experience
just-
as a staff person, it's been almost exclusively through staff. But if you wanted the input from some of the planning commissioners as part of the,
I just remember
Review
scrutinizing
committee?
them heavily, apples and apples, trying to
yeah,
figure out, yeah.
yeah. So if you wanted some input from some of the planning commission, if you want to talk to Mr. Baumgarten and you wanted our input on the bids that come back or anything, I'm sure we'd be happy to do that, however you want to approach it.
Yep, that's something I can discuss with the city manager.
Okay. Any other comments? Motions?
Motion to adjourn.
Support? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.